You are listening to a special interview edition of the Playlist Podcast. I'm your host and podcast editor over at the Playlist, Eric McClanahan, and this week I'm interviewing Ciro Guerra, director of the wonderful Colombian Oscar-nominated film Embrace of the Serpent. The film, an adventure story about an Amazonian shaman helping two explorers seek out a special hallucinogenic plant, opened in limited release in February, where I named it in my monthly column at the Playlist as the film to see for that month, and now is making its way to other theaters across the country. It's a beautiful, funny, and wholly entertaining piece of work, and I highly recommend you check it out when it opens this Friday. But without further ado, let's drop you into my chat with Ciro Guerra, where I led off by asking him about his experience at the recent Oscar ceremony.
It was quite fun. It was quite crazy, also, but it's one of a kind experiences that you don't get to see every day. So it was tremendously. I had a very good time. The Academy made us feel really welcome. We had the Oscar, the other events that we had, the cocktail and the symposium. It was a great chance to meet people from the other films and spend time with them and getting to know people, the other nominees. And it was great, and I just met so many greatly talented people that I've admired for a long time. So yes, it really is a great experience. As for the ceremony, it's we were kind of relieved that we didn't win, because it just makes it. We knew that there was a favorite going in, and it was great not to be the favorite, because it can be a lot of pressure, and even winning, it can be a lot of pressure. So we just had a great time. It was a first time for Colombia, so we just made the best of it, and we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wanted to say that too. So I love your attitude about it, and that's wonderful to hear that you just enjoyed the process. But yeah, so this was the first nomination for Colombia as a country, and it just, what do you see that effect on the industry in your country where you make movies? Is it going to do you think it'll bring some more attention, allow more films to get made?
It has been great news for Colombia. People here have been really enthusiastic about it. They've been really happy. It was something that was expected for many years, and it hadn't happened. So it was a privilege for us to have been the ones to live this experience. And yes, I think it's a moment of great enthusiasm. It's a very special moment for the country. We are hopefully this is the year in which a peace agreement will be signed that will put an end to a 50-year-old conflict. And so it's when societies are coming out of these dark ages, of war and conflict, usually the arts have a renaissance. It's accompanied by a renaissance in the arts, and Colombia is definitely living that. I think there's a lot of young people, many creative people, and many stories to tell, and a lot to think about. No, so the film is part of this process, and Colombian cinema has been growing exponentially in the last decade. So it's just a great sign, a healthy sign. And yes, there's an enthusiasm again for Colombian films, which hopefully will lead to more films being made, and not only more but better.
Yeah, definitely. Here. Well, that leads me to my next question is, I recently caught up with your second film, The Wind Journeys, just last week, actually. Believe it or not, we still have video stores here in Portland, so I was able to rent a DVD of The Wind Journeys. And man, I just wanted to say I almost loved it as much as I did Embrace of the Serpent, which, right now Embrace of the Serpent is my favorite movie of this year. I'm in love with it. But The Wind Journeys, I'd like to just know a little bit about, it takes time to make films, obviously, but The Wind Journeys started to surface and screen around 2009, and Embrace of the Serpent premiered last year at Cannes. So that's about a 5-6 year gap. Is that just sort of normal for you? Because I know your first film had a similar gap between that and Wind Journeys. Is that just the normal process for you, or does it, or were you held up to try to get these films made?
Yes, that's been sort of the normal process for me. It's not easy to make films in Colombia. It's not easy to raise financing for them. it usually takes a long time, and I also take a long time because I wrote the scripts, so that definitely there's a process of research and a process of thought, thinking deeply about the films that really takes years. I'm not a machine. It's and it's been good for me so far. Not in a hurry to make films once a year. It's for me it's a very demanding process to make a film. When I start one of these processes, it's almost scary. But yes, there are many people even here in Colombia who like that film better than even Embrace.
Oh.
It's a very special film for me. It's a very personal film for me, and yes, I cannot rank my films. I love them. I am very fond of them all. But yes, I think The Wind Journeys was a very special film also.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just wondering if part of the other process for you that naturally takes time, as you were describing, is I read, at least with Embrace of the Serpent, but I think it applies to your other films, is that you kind of, as you're making them, you're sort of working intuitively with the material, and you might adapt it as you're going, and you kind of see making the film as an adventure that you're there to discover. Is that correct? And, is that the other thing that might just take time naturally to find those elements?
Yes, it's... I don't like to start a film, if I know beforehand the film that I'm gonna make, then it's not interesting for me to make it. It's a process of discovery, of learning about the film, but also learning about myself and the people that I work with. So yeah, it's I just try to keep it flowing in a very natural way and not try to force it. Usually there have been also delays in shooting. You think I thought Embrace was going to be faster because The Wind Journeys was kind of a small success. So a lot of doors were opened, but when I started working on Embrace, it just took way longer than I expected. I thought this film was going to be made at least 3 years before it eventually got made. So because the process of research was so daunting. And also the financing process turned out to be way more difficult than we had anticipated.
Yeah, I'm assuming that process, finding funding and financing the movie, must be like the least fun process of the movie for you. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, it's the most difficult part of the film.
Always is, right?
Yeah, sadly.
This is true. Well, hopefully more doors are opening for you, and it won't be such a struggle because we need more films from you, sir. Please. Well, I guess I wanted to focus specifically on a few sequences from each film. One in The Wind Journeys and one from Embrace of the Serpent. Let's start with The Wind Journeys, and then we can really dive more into the Embrace of the Serpent, since that's the movie we're here to talk about. But that accordion duel in The Wind Journeys, the one where the lead character finally steps in, and it's a sequence that takes place for it's like a good 5 or 6 minutes, and you see several other people step up to challenge this gentleman who's the reigning champion in the accordion duel, and then finally, our hero of the story steps in. It's something we've been waiting for, and I got to tell you, man, that sequence was like transcendent for me. Like I was laughing. I was giddy with laughter just as I was enjoying it and watching it. And I just love to know, I know it's been a while since you made the film, but just maybe talk about that moment in that film, how it came together, but also how sequences sort of, I feel like a lot of your films are filled with sequences like this, like memorable moments that sort of piece the whole thing together.
Váyase usted para el infierno, ahí es que tiene que estar. De nuevo le doy su trilla, porque mi talento brilla, grandiosa es mi inspiración. Quiero verlo de rodillas, suplicándome perdón.
Yeah, well, that's a sequence that was important for me. It's the representation of the tradition of the piqueria, which is the accordion duel between musicians, which used to be the way you see it in the film. Now it's different. Now it's become different, but it's something that is still alive, and it's just such an exhilarating moment in music creation, music improvisation. That when I witnessed it, I knew that I needed to portray it on film sometime. Once I started making it, it became an integral part of the. I knew that it was going to be one of the main scenes in the Wind Journeys. So it's actually that sequence I think is the most demanding, challenging sequence I've ever done, because it was difficult in every level. It was difficult to write. It was difficult to rehearse. It was difficult to put in scene. It was difficult to edit. It was difficult to do the sound. Yeah, it was just a sequence that was tremendously difficult. But yes, it's because we had planned to do it in a certain way, in which we were very prepared, and all the improvisational part of it was sort of staged. But then we realized that it wasn't going to work. This sort of thing has to be live in order to work. So because once we thought that we were going to do it sort of like a music video, okay, in which you record it before and then you just dub it. But then what happened was that you lose the entire intensity of the scene, and everyone, the crowd and everyone, just loses it. So we just had to put it together and do it live, which was extremely difficult for everyone in the team. And but it shows. That's what gives the special energy that the scene has. And when we did it, there's a take in that sequence that is about 6 minutes long, a single take. And when we were going to do take 2, the energy was gone. The energy was gone, So it's just such a special moment in which you have to capture an energy that once the moment passes, you cannot possibly retrieve it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it definitely shows in that sequence. I'm just curious because, part of the thing I personally love about watching films from other countries is, experiencing other cultures, other things that I just haven't been exposed to, myself in my life here. But yet at the same time, being able to relate something different, as in the Accordion Duel, to something that I'm familiar with. And I just wondered if you're familiar with, like, here in America, there's been movies about it. Like the Eminem movie 8 Mile was all about these rap battles that would happen. Like, are you familiar with this, like in hip hop music at all?
I knew the musical duels in hip hop, and I knew that there's a tradition of that in blues, also in blues music, or maybe country music. And there's also the story of The Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Yeah. I
was fascinated by how this story we portrayed of the accordion, of the devil's accordion and the duel with the devil. It's something that is a very important story here in Caribbean music. But once you realize that this story repeats itself everywhere, you find it in blues music, you find it in tango music, you find it in Balkanic music. There's also the story of Paganini,
Okay, so now let's dive into Embrace of the Serpent, and the sequence in particular. I mean, I love a lot of moments in Embrace of the Serpent. I find now that I've seen it 3 times, I kind of every as I watch it now, I look forward to all these various moments, and one in particular that just I adored the first time I saw it in a film festival last year was the way you literally connect your 2 stories in one take. So maybe it's about midway through the film, and the earlier section with the young Karamakate character, they take off in the river. They're leaving one place, and the camera doesn't follow them, and instead turns left and away and goes upriver, and after about 10-15 seconds catches up with our the older Karamakate and the American explorer, in a different time period, but all in one take. And I would love to know how you conceived of that idea of linking, different time periods without an actual cut in the film, and where the inspiration came from.
Yes, in the early versions of the script, it was a very Western script in the way that everything was clear, everything was explained, and everything, all the dates were perfectly clear, and all the locations were perfectly clear, and everything. But then, as I started working with the Amazonian people, I realized that their conception of time is completely different, and the film is essentially a medium of time. That's the clay that we work on with cinema. Cinema is made of fragments of time. So I wanted the film I realized that what was going to make the film special and unique would be that it was told from that perspective. And that included this different understanding of time, in which time is not a linear sequence, which is how we're taught to experience it. But Amazonian people see it more as Amazonian shamans, especially see it more as a simultaneous multiplicity, which is funnily extremely close to the way quantum physicists define time. So I wanted the film to be an expression of that. So it's and in Amazonian storytelling, it's a storytelling in which past, present, and future intertwine and dialogue and mirror each other. So that's as the process of research went on, the film became more and more imbued with this Amazonian spirit and it's the Amazonian way of storytelling. So I started realizing that if we could create links between these different times, that make them appear to be simultaneous, it would be close to the spirit of the Amazonian people. And there is we knew that there was one moment in which we had to do it in the same shot. So I chose this transition for that. And there was another moment in which we had to do it through cuts, that one through a, how do you say, shot, counter shots? I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, in which one shot is like a dialogue, in which one shot is in one time and another shot is in another time, which is the moment in which Karamakate sees Teo on the other bank of the river.
Yeah, near the end there, right?
Yeah.
This sort of two-pronged narrative. You've got one set in about like the 1940s, if that's correct, and then the other in the early 1900s. Is that?
Yes.
Yep. So is that where that idea came from? Was essentially to put us, the viewer, into the sort of mindset of a shaman like Karamakate, because the movie sees time like you described, the way he does, or the way shamans would. So that's just essentially how it came about? Is that what the intention was?
Yes. The film. The main thing about the film is that the point of view of the film is from the Amazonian shaman, because this story has been usually told from the point of view of the explorers. So we really needed to flip his story on its head and turn it in and tell it from a different point of view. And when you switch the point of view, you realize that maybe history has been told in a very one-dimensional way. So it's about. I think that's something cinema can do. It really can make you experience the world from a particular perspective, and the perspective of Amazonian people it's very difficult for us to understand. It's very difficult for us to get into it. So the film is an attempt to build a bridge between the storytelling that we know and that we can understand, and their storytelling, which for us at first can be incomprehensible.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to put it, but yet I never felt lost with the film. And I think that's part of the magic of what you pull off with Embrace of the Serpent, is that it's a very accessible movie. I think by and large, I attribute that to the fact that it's just a really good adventure film. And I think anybody, anywhere can relate to that. I think that crosses cultures across the world, essentially. Like, people can understand that, yet it's not a simple movie. You're not telling a simplistic narrative. It's quite complex. And I just, I commend you for that. I don't really have a question to go with on there, but yeah, I think that's part of the secret there of what works, is the way you talk about, indigenous people, and the way you wanted to give that perspective for, one of the few times that's ever happened in cinema. You did that with this film. What do you think about, a lot of, there's a whole subgenre of horror movies about the cannibal horror movies, Cannibal Holocaust and things like that portray indigenous, people not in exactly a fair light. A lot of those movies are just light entertainment. It's maybe we don't need to take them too seriously, but I wonder if part of your desire to make this story from that perspective was just beyond it just being, like, it's time we do that, but also, like, did you want to have a response to movies like, Cannibal Holocaust or things like that, where people might get a skewed version of an indigenous person?
Yes, regarding what you were talking about first,
Mm.
I thought it was very easy to make this a cryptic film, a film that very for a niche film for very few people to understand,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a problem with many of the most artistically daring films today, that they are very close to a very restrained niche,
Mm-hmm.
and I want and this the way that this do it because of what this film was talking about, it needed to be a film for that could be accessible for anyone, so it would have been dishonest to make a very cryptic film, which is just something that we could have done, a very esoteric, incomprehensible film, it would have been dishonest because what the indigenous people that were collaborating with us where the main interest was to communicate, to communicate with the outside world and to an audience as large as possible. So it was important that the film was able, that you were able, anyone from whether or not they had any interest in the Amazon before, could be engaged and entertained by the film and seduced by the film. So that's something that is very uh, that is at the beginning. That was my main struggle writing the script was that, how do we make this film more accessible, how to invite the viewer in,
Yeah.
and and as for the other films, I really don't. I've s- I don't think that I can say that I am answering to those films. I don't know them very well, but I know that what they express, it's the view that Western society has had of these indigenous communities forever. They're just a continuation of that idea, which is a very untruthful idea in the end, because this is a bit controversial in the anthropological world,
Mm.
scientific world, but Koch Grunberg, the scientist which inspired our film,
Mm-hmm.
his diaries were our source of inspiration. He claimed that he saw no sign of cannibalism amongst the indigenous people, and something that was used as a way to put a label on them,
Mm.
to justify their extermination. It's something that we still see today. When someone is labeled a terrorist, it used to be like that. When someone was labeled a cannibal, it was like you can deprive them of their humanity by attaching this label on them. So yes, that was the process that happened in Colombia and in a lot of places during the early 20th century.
Yeah, yeah. There's just a sense in this film of like, it's so elemental and naturalistic. Naturalistic. There's the whole adventure aspect of it that I love, but also you come off as to me as a very sensualistic filmmaker. Everything in these films, there's like a sensory experience that really is effective in the way you make films. And I'm talking from the look of the pictures to the sound design, especially in Embrace of the Serpent. I just think the sound design is incredible, and the way you mix that with the original music by, forgive me, is it Nascui Linaire?
Yeah,
Linaires?
not as you say.
Yeah, love the music there, but yet the sound design and the way you kind of use the natural sounds of the jungle to create almost it's like a three-dimensional effect on the viewer. For me, I feel like what I'm saying is the movie's very immersive in a way, and I think that's really important for cinema nowadays. Like, things have to feel big if you're gonna, most people can watch movies at home on their TV screens, but to really go to a theater and experience something on the big screen, I feel like a movie it needs to deserve to be up on that big screen. And I love that about the Wind Journeys, and especially Embrace of the Serpent, is that it's a big movie. It should be seen on a really big screen. And I just just curious what you think about, using all those elements, the sensual, the elemental, the naturalistic. Is that something that just comes naturally to you? Has that always been something you've wanted to do as a filmmaker?
Yes, I agree totally with you, and in the sense that I think the cinema should be an experience, and I think it has the effect that cinema can have on the senses is something that I think it's no other art form can come close to it. So for me it's always very important that the films are uh, that you can really feel where you are. They have a strong sense of place, and the tools of cinema allow you to do that. To put you in there. Now, for Embrace of the Serpent, as when you mentioned the sound design, we had a concept that we wanted to do. The sound design is the creation of Carlos Garcia, who is a brilliant Colombian sound designer who lives between Colombia and Denmark. He works in the Centropa films, and
Okay.
and he had this concept of we had this concept together of uh, creating a trance-like state through the sound, using the sounds of nature and its frequencies in a way that it would take the viewer into a trance-like state, sort of a spiritual state, which is the state in which Amazonian people used to tell stories, that they you are sort of elevated by the sound. You do that without only using the frequencies of the natural environments, and that creates a feeling that can only be experienced in completely in the cinema.
No, I agree. I agree. Perfectly put. Well, you said your sound designer lives between sometimes in Colombia, sometimes in Denmark. So is that perhaps how you came to meet one of your main actors, Jan Bivuet, the actor who plays Theo, the explorer in the film? Because he's a Danish actor, if I'm correct. Is that right, or is he actually German?
No, he's Belgian.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, he's Belgian. Okay. I guess
Yeah.
the reason I ask, or I thought that, is because I'm curious if you saw the film he was in from a few years ago called Borgman.
Yes, yes,
Oh, and
yes.
I love that film. So I'd love to know, yeah, how you came to meet him and if you saw the film. Yeah.
Yeah, I was. It was very difficult to find an actor who would be willing to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I was concerned about how he was going to work. And during that process at a festival, I saw Borgman, and it was like falling in love. It was everything in your body tells you that it's him. It's him. And there was no turning back. It was him. He was exactly what I had imagined the character would be, and I never got that feeling with any other actor. So I just contacted him through and sent him the script and sent him. He also saw my previous film, and he's a really adventurous actor. He's a really sweet, tender guy, but also a very adventurous actor who likes challenges. So he took on this gigantic challenge, with such a level of rigor and compromise that was moving.
Yeah, it's. I'm so glad to hear. You liked Borgman as well. That was a movie a couple years ago that really blew me away. And there's just something about his face. Like, he has a face unlike anybody else, and the camera definitely seems to love that face. And I think you make really good use of it in the film. I also think you make really good use of both your actors that portray Karamakate. Nilbio Torres plays the younger version. Antonio Bolivar plays the older version. I love them both. Like, the movie wouldn't work without both of them giving really great performances, and of course, making us believe that it's the same guy. They have to pull that off. Did you find these actors earlier in the process or later? How did you find them?
It was a bit later in the process. Once we found the place that we could shoot the film, which was the Vaupés region in the northwest Amazon. We realized that we started going around the villages and inviting people to be a part of the film and looking for actors, and we found these wonderful actors. We chose them because of their personal story, their personal backstory, and the way they looked on camera. The camera really they were really interesting, but and they also had a personal story that was close to the film. So it was, but it was a question for me. Are we going to be able to invite them to act, and were we going to be able to pull it off? But it turned out to be much easier than I expected. Because these people may not have a background in acting, and they don't have any contact with theater or something like that, but they have this oral tradition. They tell stories for a life. That to them it's important, it's essential. So they have the ability to listen, and they know how to really listen. And I really didn't understand the meaning of listening until I spent time with them. So it was a lot easier than I expected, and they just brought so much of themselves onto the characters, and we collaborated on the script, and they rewrote the script, and they put many things, they corrected many things, and they put much of their personal experience. So that's I agree with you. Definitely they make the film special. We hadn't had this kind of actors. It's just something that you cannot fake. There's something about them that you just cannot fake.
This is true. This is true. One of the locations in this film that just, I mean, I love. I kind of wish I could go everywhere that you shot this movie because, I'm a person that likes to, get out in nature, do some camping, some backpacking. Of course, I've never seen anything like the location you find at the end of the film. The sort of there's like 3 mounds, or they're not mountains. They're like kind of large hills. And is that called the Cerros de Maracure? I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. Is that the correct location?
Yes, it's the Mavecure Los Cerros de Mavecure, the Mavecure Mountains.
Yeah. How did you find them? Or had you always known about them? Or did you find them while you were scouting? How did that happen?
I knew them from before.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were scouting for the film, I went and saw them, and when I saw them, I realized what a special place they are. What a sacred, unbelievable place they are. And that was what we needed for the end of the film. It was originally planned in the Chiribiquete Mountains, which is another Amazonian range, which is even more impressive. But that place is just unreachable. It's you need to go there, to spend 2 weeks on a boat to get there, and there's not the possibility of bringing a crew there or staying there or anyway, because these Amazonian mountain ranges are very particular. They are unlike any other that you have that exists. These are some of the oldest mountains on Earth, and they are the result of what's left of what used to be a huge mountain range like the Andes.
Oh, wow.
It's and they are sacred to the people. In Amazonian, the Amazonian people call them the Puis. And you find a lot of them in Venezuela, but some of them also in Colombia and Brazil. Even you saw Up.
What's that?
Pixar?
Oh, yes, Up. Yep, yeah.
That location, the place in which they are in Up, is one of these places.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Now I'm like visually remembering it. The overall, if you could just talk about the look of the film, the decision. I believe you shot it on 35 millimeter, and it's the decision to show it in black and white.
Yes, the film is inspired by the journals of the explorers, but also by the images that they took. When I saw these images for the first time, they were very impressive for me, because what you saw there was an Amazon that was completely different to the idea that you have of the Amazon. It was an Amazon that was completely devoid of all this exuberance and exoticism, and it just felt like a different world, a different time speaking through you through those images. And when I went there, I started doing research on the film, I realized that it was not going to be possible to portray the colors of the Amazon on film, and especially what they mean to the people there. These are people that have 50 different words for what we call green. So it's I just decided I just thought that this way we could trigger the audience's imagination. The Amazon that you see on the film, I don't think it's the real Amazon. It's an imagined Amazon, but that imagined Amazon is certainly going to be more real than what we could portray.
Cuando se quiere se puede, a ustedes yo los complaco y también a las mujeres. Este es el amor que me divierte. Cuando estoy en la parranda, yo me acuerdo de la muerte. Con la nota de mi acordeón, hago un verso muy sentido, que me salga un
Ciro, thank you so much, man. I just again, I adore this film. I'm gonna be championing Embrace of the Serpent all year long because it's of course finally just getting to our theaters here in Portland now. So yeah, thanks again for all your time, man. I'll sign off with you by just saying I wish the Yacruno plant was real because that could be a fun experience for sure. So you have a hell of an imagination, but you're also a hell of a filmmaker. So I hope you keep it up, man. And I can't wait to see what else you do.
Thank you very much. It makes me very happy to find such enthusiastic people discovering the film, and hopefully the audiences in Portland will be also as enthusiastic as you.
I hope so too, man. All right, well, you have a good rest of your day, and I can't wait to see what else you got next, and be well, sir.
All right, bye-bye, Eric.
Bye.
Thank you.
Dispuesto para lo que sea.